What happens to people? I know the answer, and I've witnessed so many clients and people, not my clients, but this has happened to. What happens when you die without a will?
Well,
And you have wealth.
oh, basically the government is going to dictate who's going to get what.
Yes.
It's called the succession law, and it's just ranks all beneficiaries equally. So if you have a spouse, and that doesn't include a common law spouse, if you're in a common law relationship, they're out. But if you have a married legal spouse, then they are first in line to get the first chunk of your estate.
You know who made it.
Welcome back to the Wealth Easy Show, where we talk all things wealth, health, and real estate. Today, folks, I got a real special treat. We're going to be talking tax and estate planning. And my guest today has been practicing law since 2005. She specializes in the areas of immigration, real estate, wills, estates, and corporate law. She is the co-founder of Aon Law Partners here in Toronto. Please welcome to the show, Marlenne Doss. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you for coming. Real question. What inspired you to be a lawyer? Because I read your bio and you went to university. You did bioscience, right? Or
Neuroscience and psychology is my undergrad, not related to law.
polar opposites.
Yeah. Well, to answer that question, I have to take you back a little bit.
Sure.
So when I was in high school, I actually always wanted to be a lawyer. I grew up watching, and this is going to date me, but like Perry Mason and things like that with my family.
Yeah.
And I was always interested in the law. And then as I got later in the years in high school, I found out that my dad actually went to law school back home, which is Egypt.
Okay.
But when he came to Canada, the laws were different then. So he was going to have to start over. So he was almost done. He had one more year to go, but because he had a family and stuff, he had to let it go. So I didn't know this about my dad. I just knew him as a postal worker. He worked in the post office for my whole life, which was great, supported us. And when I was telling him that I want to go in law, he told me at some point in high school, which shocked me, that he was actually almost a lawyer himself. So in high school, I went in thinking that I was going to be a lawyer, and then I started taking science courses, and I was really interested in that. And I knew that it would be easier to move from sciences to arts rather than the other way around. So that's why I did my undergrad in neuroscience and psychology, just to keep both options open. And when I graduated, I was on the fence between social work and law. Mm-hmm. Applied to both, and I said, okay, wherever I'm meant to be is where I'm going to be. And I got into Queen's Law, and that's where I went. And thankfully, no regrets. It was a great program, great degree, versatile, and it's helped in many aspects besides my personal practice. So
good. And what area of law did you article in?
I articled in intellectual property.
Okay.
I think I got pigeonholed that way because of the science background, which actually, it was great. I loved intellectual property, actually. It was very interesting. And I practiced it as a trademark agent for a while afterwards. But, as the years go on and you want to hone in and narrow down and focus and just use your time and expertise more efficiently. So I let that go actually not too long ago. And now I'm focusing on estate planning and estate administration. They kind of go hand in hand, unfortunately. And real estate, that's a big part of our practice. Mm-hmm. I used to do a lot more corporate, but we have pretty strong corporate lawyers in our team now. So they take the lead on most of that for us now.
So when you talk estate, are you talking estate for individuals or both individuals and corporate, like business owners?
Yeah, both. Yeah.
Both.
So personal, family, business owners, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the recent tax changes.
Mm-hmm.
The government tabled in their budget that they're now going to increase the capital gains inclusion rate to 66%. A lot of people are very confused. They think it's a 66%, 66.7% right off the hop. It's not. It's for individuals, everything past 250.
Yeah.
But business owners, they're really going to get hammered. How do you think that this recent tax change is going to affect business owners?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge to get their money back out of their corporations in the most tax efficient way. I think there's a lot of business owners that have already been jumping ship and getting out of Canada. Mm-hmm. So I think we might see a drive in that even further, people moving not just to the U.S., but in other more tax incentive places, depending on your business. Some people can, some people can't, right? And I think people are just going to be looking for tax planning strategies where you can avoid all of it, and it's not meant to be avoided, but some of it can be postponed. There's strategies to postpone when those taxes are going to be triggered, and there's strategies to help you utilize other products and things to get your money out of your corporations more tax efficiently.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that because let's explain for the listeners, because there's so much confusion about this whole inclusion rate. Why don't you explain for the listeners how it actually works and what the budget is actually proposing?
So, okay, I'll tell you my limited scope of it.
Yeah.
Basically, what they're saying is right now, when you have a capital gain, so on a secondary property or business, if it's sold or whatever, and it's grown in value,
Yes.
right? That's considered a capital gain. Or at death. Death is a huge tax triggering event, and a lot of people don't realize that. So whether you've actually sold it or not, it's deemed disposed, considered sold when somebody passes away, right? Which is why secondary wills can be very helpful. But anyways, so what happens is you take the growth. Now, what the current way things are is 50% of that growth gets added to your income tax return. So for that individual personal income tax return, and then you get taxed on that. So if that bumps you up to the highest tax bracket, then you're paying basically 25% of the growth in your tax return, and you have to have the funds available to do so, right?
Yes.
Now what they're going to do is for personal, the first 250,000 of that growth, it will still be kept at the 50%, but growth after that is what they're proposing is going to be taxed at 66.7%. So the amount of gain that's going to be included, and then you're going to be taxed on it, is going to be, 16.7% higher, which is a considerable amount.
Yeah, especially for, grandma who bought her Muskoka cottage for $200,000 in 1950, and she's enjoyed it for so many years, and she's had a couple of generations enjoying it. And she thinks that, I'm not really wealthy, but I have this cottage that I bought for $200,000 on Lake Rosso, and now it's worth $3 million. How is this going to affect her when she's going to sell it?
So it's funny. I just did a plan with a couple that are in their 70s, and they just have two properties. They didn't think they had much, but they bought them, and they own property in Scarborough. Not a cottage, but two houses in Scarborough, and they're now both over 1.5 million easily, right? And when I was talking to them about capital gains and their taxes and stuff, they were shocked. Nobody had spoken to them about it. First time in their 70s doing their estate plans, unfortunately. So it's a big thing, There are trusts that are available if you're over 65, and moving some of these assets into those trusts could be a good thing, because it'll at least delay the trigger of when these taxes have to be paid until later in life, until those individuals pass away.
But sorry, let me interrupt you for a sec. If you're going to transfer a property into a trust, is that not considered a new ownership, and there's going to be tax on that?
So these ones roll over. There's a rollover for the alter ego and the spousal trust.
Okay.
So you're allowed to transfer these assets in without the taxes being triggered when you change it. That's the benefit of it.
Okay.
And then the capital gain only gets triggered when that individual passes away. So there's rules on it, who can benefit from the property and the asset. And any income from it while you're still alive, right? That's restricted, but at least it's in there, right? So at the very
kids
minimum,
worry about it.
Yeah. Well, it's also you're at least going to save in the estate administration tax, which is 1.5%. So 1.5% on $3 million. That's already $45,000.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's your probate fee, right?
That's yes. Yeah. It was called the probate fee. Now it's called the estate administration tax. They're the
Oh,
same
they
thing.
just fancied up the word.
Yes. People call it death tax, and I think they're like, no,
probate.
that sounds horrible, but yes.
It's a tax for the government.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And it varies from province to province, but even just that, transferring certain assets that these individuals over 65 and over into these kinds of trusts can be a huge tax saver. Again, capital gains will still be triggered eventually, and it'll still have to be paid, right? But there's probably insurance products and things that are out there that can help with those pieces. I mean, the goal is to preserve this asset, right? Like if you're talking about a cottage and it's been a family cottage for however many decades, I'm sure a lot of people don't want this tax bill to force them to sell the cottage.
Right.
Right? So at least things are out there that can give them some options. Once it's in a trust, or if it makes sense, and this is where the accountant will have to come in to create a family trust and move some of these assets into the family trust now, or businesses, right? Estate freezes is another topic, probably for another day.
Yeah, we can have a whole podcast on estate freezes.
Yes. So, it has to make sense, right, that transfer, because there will be some taxes that are triggered right when you move them in. But if the growth of the business is happening in the future and it makes sense to do it now, and you're not too young, because after 21 years, there's another tax.
There's a deemed
trigger.
Disposition after 21 years. Yeah.
That's
You
right.
got to pay, whether you sold it or not, you got to pay a tax. There's a tax bill.
That's right. That's right. So you don't want to do it too early, but you also don't want to do it too late, when the cost of getting these assets into the trust or into, that other vehicle, even into a corporation, if there's no rollover, is not too costly for the individual.
Hey everyone, it's John. I just wanted to thank you for being here, and I would ask that you please subscribe to the show by just clicking the subscribe button right here. I'd really appreciate it. It helps grow the show so we can get even more successful guests on the program to help you. If you're already subscribed, a huge thank you. When you subscribe, you're going to get access to the program before anybody else does. So if you would, just click subscribe right here. Thanks so much, and welcome back to the Wealth Eazy show. Yeah, what's the average setup cost to set up a trust?
It depends. We usually do them hourly, so it depends on the complexity of it. I'd say you're looking at least $2,000, $2,500, and upwards of that, $5,000, $6,000. Depends on who's involved, right, and the assets that are being transferred. Of course, if there's a corporate piece to it, where there's some restructuring and reorganization, obviously those parts need to be considered as well, and along with their own fees.
Can a settler of the trust, the person who's setting up the trust as the settler, can he also be, or she be also a beneficiary of the trust that they are settling?
So it depends again. For the alter ego and spousal trusts, yes, they can. When you're using it for the tax strategies, they might still be associated back to the settler if they're the same person as the trustees, right? So typically you want a separate settler, and then the trustees are the ones that actually hold or own the assets, so to speak, on behalf, like they manage it on behalf of the trust, and then they can do whatever they want to with the beneficiaries, right? But you can have different classes of beneficiaries. So it can be a good vehicle to include children, grandchildren, whatever.
Yes.
And as they grow in age enough so that you can income split with them or whatever it is, you can offset a lot of the gains and the taxes that are coming into the trust on a given year.
Well, this is how the Rockefellers have perpetuated their generational wealth for decades, and they're still one of the richest families in the world.
That's right.
And I wrote a chapter in my new book that's just out called Wealth Without Wall Street, and the chapter is called Be a Rockefeller, Not a Vanderbilt.
Yes.
And the Rockefellers started a long time ago, starting with John Jr., creating a family trust. And he made all his children the beneficiaries. And what he did was he bought a whole life insurance policy on each one of them. And any child or any beneficiary of the trust who received money out of the trust, the life insurance would replace and then some the money back into the trust upon their death. And this perpetuated their wealth for generations.
Yeah.
It works.
Incredible. Those whole life policies, and I think a lot of people don't understand them, including a lot of advisors and accountants, unfortunately. But when they're used properly, they can really generate a lot of wealth. And if nothing else, then at the end, they can be used to offset or to pay off a lot of these taxes. But there's a lot of strategies that are available with them. Yep.
Yeah. So, and the one other thing that the government did do is they've increased for business owners the lifetime capital gains exemption, it's now $1,250,000. So there was quite a big bump because I think it was just shy of 1.1. So it's now $1,250,000. Going back to trusts. Now I know that there's a great strategy that if you want to multiply that, the business owner can set up, would it be a family trust?
Yes.
And put all his kids, like he can put his kids in, and now you've just multiplied. If you got 4 kids, you put them all in your spouse, and you can multiply that lifetime capital gains exemption by 4 or 5 times by using a trust. Is that something that you often do with business owners?
Yes, yeah, we do in our firm. Obviously, you have to have enough wealth to make that make sense for you, right?
Yeah.
Because with the trust, you're also dealing with the annual filings for them and stuff. So there's maintenance costs for them. But yeah, if it fits your plan and it makes sense 100%, that's what you should be doing. That's one of the huge benefits of having the family trust is the ability to multiply the capital gains exemption.
Yeah.
Right. And spread income, and there's income splitting and stuff amongst the beneficiaries. So
Trudeau kind of, when he came into power in 2015, he kind of kiboshed a lot of that income splitting and sprinkling.
Yes.
All right. You can still do some income splitting, but the sprinkling to your kids and stuff, he kind of kiboshed all that. He's just really, I don't know. He doesn't like business owners, and he doesn't like seeing people do well. And this whole equalization, this whole idea of increasing the capital gains was, well, why should the wealthy, do well in the middle class? Well, maybe they worked harder. Maybe they're the ones that took the risk. I don't agree with it personally. I think I don't know what's going to happen if Pierre Poilievre comes in, because they tried this back in '88. They increased it to 66.7%, and that was when Mulroney was in power. And then in '90 they went to 75%.
That's insane.
And they found that didn't work. But it wasn't until about 2008 that they dropped it right back to 50%. Increasing taxes to try and nab the wealthy is not going to work. Unfortunately, the bigger lion's share of the taxes are paid by the wealthy, not the middle class. But when you go after them, they've got smart lawyers like yourself. They have smart accountants to distribute and use certain strategies that hides their wealth. It's not going to work. These are the people that are creating the jobs and providing employment for the middle class people. Why are you going after them? I just don't understand. And I think Trudeau has it all wrong when you're trying to penalize them and say, well, just because you did well and good for you that you took all the risk, but now we're going to penalize you for doing well.
Right.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, that's why a lot of people are trying to move their wealth across the world, really.
And he wants to penalize you for that too. He wants to charge you $25,000 to exit.
Well, you don't necessarily exit. I'm just saying there's other there's other things that people are trying to do to get their assets outside of Canada and protect themselves, because it doesn't make sense. The take home after you've done all the work is not what people are expecting it to be. And yes, it's great. You need taxes. They do fund a lot of stuff, and we need our roads fixed. We have a healthcare system that doesn't need some work, but it's there. And people aren't paying for it. So we need the taxes, but they also can't be unreasonable so that people are wanting to leave. And that's not what you want. You want businesses to come in and to grow, you know. So it's interesting because from the immigration side, that's what they're trying to do with the startup visa programs and things like that. They're encouraging entrepreneurs with money and whatever to come into Canada. But how long will they stay?
But even if I look over the last 5 years, the people that Trudeau is bringing in, I believe in immigration.
Yeah.
We're not producing enough children. We need more people in this workforce. We need to get more people into the country. Yeah. But is it the wrong people? Are we bringing in people that are relying on the system and not contributing to the system? And I think that's been a big problem. That not enough people that are coming into Canada are starting businesses. And I think a lot of people that want to start a business, they're looking at this and going, why the hell would I?
Yeah.
Where is the incentive? people thought the American dream was go to America, start a business, work hard, and you can have anything you want.
Right.
People are looking at Canada and going, well, if I'm going to work harder, the harder I work, the more I'm getting penalized. So why would I want to work harder to get penalized more? Because the moment I make it $220,000, 54 cents is going to go to the government. Why would I work harder for them? You know what June 19th is? Tax Freedom Day. That is the day that you no longer are working for the government. You're working for yourself.
Yeah.
It's more than 6 months that you have every day that you go to work right now. Everything that we're doing right now is going to the government. Only after June 19th are we working for ourselves, which is pretty pathetic if you ask me in this country.
I mean, that makes it sound horrible. That's why people are looking for other income streams too, right? They're not focusing on just their businesses. They're doing, other investments. They're trying to find passive income streams. Real estate is a big thing, but you have to, again, strategize it properly so that you're not hit with that huge bill. It's not a short game for the most part. But yeah, it's it's not good.
It's not pretty. It's not a pretty situation. So how do you think this is going to affect business owners? Like what type of planning you're doing with business owners now when they see this? Because a business owner gets to invest their income, but any passive income that they receive inside their hold company is taxed at 54%, up to the first $50,000. Woohoo! Is tax free, but anything after that, they're taxed at 54%. So a lot of business owners don't even want to invest for their retirement and have this passive income. What type of strategies are you advising your clients on looking to best use the money inside their corporation? Because pulling out the retained earnings, they're going to get hit with a tax bill.
Yeah.
Investing in assets or things that can produce passive income are getting hit at 54%. What else does a business owner have to prepare for their retirement?
That's probably a better question for you. But we
what are you advising? What are you guys advising on?
Listen, we say, do you have a good accountant?
Yeah.
And do you have a good financial advisor? That's when I'm dealing with my clients, I can't do estate planning without knowing those pieces. Especially if you're a business owner and your business is growing or has grown, then, as soon as they come in front of me, the problem is a lot of people who have businesses delay in this piece, right? They're so busy working on their businesses and growing it and whatever, and this just goes to the back burner and it just stays there for way too long. Until something like this happens and some of them move, they find the motivation to finally get moving and stuff like that. But, it depends on when they come to us, right? But I like to roundtable it with as many other professionals with different lenses as possible, because everybody is coming in with their advice and with their lens, right? So the accountant who's been with this business owner since inception or whatever it is, who has the inside knowledge, they're going to be the first people to say, okay, you should consider an estate freeze. You should consider a family trust, These assets you can probably put into a corporation or whatever. My job is to paper all of that up, right? Yes, the clients come to me, and if they don't have somebody who's already talking to them about the stuff, then that's definitely part of the conversation that we have. And if they have a lot of wealth that's in there, then yes, do you have a good financial advisor? So we can start looking into the insurance policies and other investment things that you can set up, whether it's in your family trust or otherwise, that can continue to grow there. Rather than in your pocket and being taxed in your pocket every year, right? But that's really it. Like, it's the conversations. You have to start. You just have to start.
What type of strategies are you hearing from other advisors and accountants in your roundtable for business owners for moving money out of their operating company into their holdcos or getting it out to their hands? Using it as leverage for income,
Yes.
Postmortem tax planning. What are you hearing from accountants?
So life insurance has always been a good product, especially for after death. But I think now more people are becoming aware and are starting to use the whole life policies as investment vehicles, and also to get those funds out, on a tax-free basis. Dare I say?
It is tax-free because if you've got your retained earnings in an operating company and the holding company owns the shares of the opco, you can move money up and down between the corporations, and
Yes.
you can move your retained earnings up into a holdco. The question is that money sitting in a holdco, how do I get that money out into my hands on a
Right.
most tax efficient basis? The one thing that also just recently happened is this new capital gains inclusion rate really messes up stripping. Right? Capital gains strips.
Yeah.
A lot of accountants were using it. Doesn't make sense now. So now you're going to get away from accountants that were saying, okay, now I can't strip it down
Right.
into 27%. What other vehicles are there? Corporately owned life insurance policy is just one of those vehicles that you could take money from a holdco, move it into a corporately owned life insurance policy, and you as a shareholder get to access it through your lifetime. But not only that, you get to collateralize it and use the line of credit on the policy and get tax-free retirement. It is all tax-free, and then it gets all repaid on death. But the other thing that happens too is that once you die, it gets paid back to the corporation's balance sheet and lands on the capital dividend account. Now that all gets paid out tax-free to its
That's right.
shareholders.
That's right.
I think that is one of the only remaining financial tools that the business owner has. Now there's new inclusion rate because you can't do a capital strip anymore.
But it's a really good tool. And
It's been around for 200 years.
yeah, but nobody's known about it. I think in my experience anyways, in the last, I would say like 5 years even, there's a lot more financial advisors that are speaking about it and becoming aware of it. I don't think they even, were aware of it. That's my experience anyways. Some that have been in it for a long time and, have had the business owners as their clients and stuff. I think they've been aware of it.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot more education happening with it. And they're encouraging their clients to use it as part of their retirement plan too, because business owners are not going to put their funds into RSPs and tax-free savings accounts. And, once that's maxed out, then what, right? Even then. And then when you take that out, you're paying taxes on it once you have to, draw out from your RIF and stuff. So they're looking for better strategies than that, right? So as you're saying, borrowing against that whole life insurance policy and with that line of credit or whatever.
It's one of the most misunderstood products,
Yes.
but it's been around longer than the Federal Reserve.
I did not know that.
It's been around 200 years.
I didn't know that actually.
Yeah. It's been around 200 years. And I can name off companies like Sun Life, who's been around for 160 years.
Yes.
And they've never failed to make a dividend payment in any year. Never failed.
Yes.
And even during the Great Depression of 1929, when 9,000 banks failed, not one insurance company failed.
Wow.
Not one.
Yeah. Well, that's a huge stat.
It is, but people just they look at it because they try to assimilate life insurance with death, and nobody wants to think about
100%. Same with estate planning.
Yeah.
This is the problem. Actually, and I try to tell my clients, like, estate planning is like setting up a life insurance policy. It's not because you're going to need it tomorrow. It's just because you're going to need it one day. We know you're going to need it. Death and taxes, right? Only two guaranteed things. Burying your head in the sand is not the answer. It's never served anybody. It's never served anybody's families. Like, I see so many disastrous situations where people just didn't get around to it or didn't do it properly or tried to do it themselves or, all kinds of lovely stuff. And it's the people that they leave behind that are suffering. They're trying to figure out how to pay these tax bills, even if it's due by the estate. Well, where's it going to come from? So, just the whole cycle of it is messy and so avoidable. And that's why I think things like this, shows like this, are so important, because it's the lack of education and the lack of awareness. Everybody thinks it's somebody else. This doesn't relate to me. It's somebody else. I'm like, no, it's you. It's you and it's your family. And it doesn't matter what you have. As small as you think, your assets are, it's still important. The tax planning, the estate planning, at least have the conversation. And if you have the conversation with somebody who you trust And at the end of the conversation, they're like, no, you actually have nothing. You don't need a will. And I've done that maybe twice in the last 15 years, where I've said, no, that's okay. For you, you don't actually need a will. They probably still need the powers of attorney. That's a different, piece there. And so important. And the pain that it causes not to have that.
Yes.
But honestly, if you have, at least get informed. And if the conclusion is that you're good where you sit, then fantastic, But if you can put something in place, if I could tell you that you put something in place, and unless huge stuff changes, you probably don't have to revisit it again for 10, 20, whatever years. What do you have to lose? Really, what do you have to lose? But what do you have to gain?
Lots to gain.
Lots to gain. And how's your family going to feel?
I would say life insurance is a love product.
Yeah.
If you love your family, you are going to make sure that they're not going to suffer. All you're doing is you're taking a guaranteed event, which is death, and you're going to match it up with a guaranteed contract.
That's right.
Why wouldn't you want to do that? Whole life insurance is a guaranteed contract to pay out on death. You are going to die. So marry it up. People will spend more time planning their next vacation than they will their estate and their taxes. And then when it's too late and they say, oh, I just realized that I'm in bad health, I'm going to have a $5 million estate tax bill. I think I should get life insurance. Sorry.
You don't qualify.
You can't buy it when you're sick.
Yeah.
I can't not have insurance on my car, get into a car accident, and
That's
call
right.
Allstate and go, hey guys, I made a boo-boo today. Can you insure my car been in an accident? No. It doesn't work like that. You don't qualify.
Exactly. And it's going to cost you so much more as you get older, right?
It does.
Even if you do qualify. With age, the rates for these policies increase. Like that's just the reality, right?
Yeah. You touched on something. You talked about, at least having that conversation with a will. What happens to people? I know the answer, and I've witnessed so many clients and people, not my clients, but this has happened to. Mm-hmm. What happens when you die without a will?
Well.
And you have wealth.
Oh. Basically, the government is going to dictate who's going to get what.
Yes.
It's called the succession law, and it's just ranks all beneficiaries equally. So if you have a spouse, and that doesn't include a common law spouse, if you're in a common law relationship, they're out. But if you have a married legal spouse, then they are first in line to get the first chunk of your estate. Now, if you have a spouse and children, whether they're minors or not, the rest of that is going to be split in ratios. There's proportion according to the law of how it's going to be split between the spouse and whatever children you have alive. Okay? So if they're under 18, you've just created a huge mess. The government bodies are going to be involved. They're going to hold on to these assets. Whether it's $5 million that you're leaving behind or less than that, you have one child, you have two children. They're going to manage it until they're 18, and they're going to hand it over to your kids. Here you go. You're 18. Here's $2 million. Do with it what you want. Can they manage that?
No.
I don't think so. And if you're not married and you don't have children, then the next in line is your parents. Don't know how old they are, so that might just come back. If your parents have already passed away, then it goes to your siblings. Do you get along with them? Do you not get along with them? Your children as well. Do you get along with them? Do you not get along with them? Your spouse even. Is your plan to stay married or not stay married? All these things are why the conversations need to happen.
And it's also contestable too, no? I mean, if someone dies, they're dying intestate.
Yes.
And it's going to go to the court, and basically anybody. I guess the court. You said they're going to rank it, right?
That's right.
What are you suggesting, and what kind of advice are you providing to your clients to protect them from that even happening, and to try and bring that probate fee? You call it a succession fee?
Estate administration.
I still call it a probate fee.
Yeah,
I'm
probate
old
fee
school.
is fine. That's okay. Most people know it as that.
What are you doing to help your clients eliminate that? Because when I sit with my clients, I say you want to leave as little as possible.
Yes.
Inside a will. One, it's contestable. You can have some lost nephew come up and contest it saying you promised him this, you promised him that. They can fight it in court. It prolongs things. But also the big thing too is the more you have in it, the more your probate fees are going to cost you. What type of advice and planning are you doing with your clients?
So probate fee is not the big one that you should be worried about, to be honest. That's in my opinion. I mean, it can be if we're talking again like that $4 million house, the probate fee on that is going to be high. So there's strategies, put that in a corporation, put that in a trust or whatever to offset that. But the bigger part is
Would that be a second home or principal residence?
a second home. Yeah.
Second home, because principal residence is paid
exempt.
its tax.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes, yes. So secondary homes, investment properties,
Yeah.
cottages, those things, non-registered investments, they're going to fall in, right? But what you need to do is to have at least a basic plan, okay? So some things that go into your estate, through your will, I should say, is okay. And there's charitable donations that you can make on an ongoing basis or at the, date of death or like from when you pass away that can offset some of those taxes that might become due. There's usually I'll have a conversation with them and ask them if they have insurance policies in place, and if not, and it makes sense, they have enough that they should at least be having these conversations. Get that. Even if these taxes have to be paid, why do they have to come out of your estate? Pay that little bit of your premium, name your beneficiaries or whatever it is, or even name your estate as the beneficiary, depending on the circumstances, and let those taxes come out of that. So at least it's not part of what you've built, right? But yeah, at the very least, they need to have a will and they need to have their powers of attorneys in place. The more complex your situation and the more you have, the more complex planning you will need, right? But for all of those out there, which is most people that say, that's not me, you are an individual who does need at least the basic plan in place. The amount of wealth, and I'm sure you've heard this as well, that they're expecting to be transferred in the next decade because of the aging population is unbelievable. And the amount of taxes that are going to come from that is so unbelievable and avoidable in many ways. You can't avoid all of it. We're not trying to evade taxes, but we are trying to delay them, right? So as much as you can. And minimize them, for sure. If you had the choice, would you want more to go to your family or to go to charities that you love or to go to, things like that? Or would you want it to go to the CRA?
Yeah. I always, when I sit with a client, I have this story I talk. It's called the reading of the will. And everyone, the family's gathered around. You're mourning the loss of a loved one. And the lawyer is reading the will. And to my beloved CRA, I leave you the greatest portion of my net worth because I failed to plan.
Yeah. And
it's not because I love you the most, but I do look forward to your annual Christmas card. Sincerely. And people hear that, they start laughing. It's like, well, why would you do this? Because if you failed to plan,
that's what's going to happen.
You are going to give the lion's share to the CRA and not your loved ones.
That's right.
So the biggest thing is when you're trying to position life insurance, it's like, do you want this to happen? Do you want your family to have to create a fire sale to liquidate assets because you now have a final tax bill that must get paid?
Yeah.
Life insurance takes care of that. It takes care of all the unnecessary rearranging of financial affairs. Mm-hmm. It pays out in 30 days, less than 30 days.
Yes, very quick.
Very quickly, right? When choosing an executor to your estate, because obviously you need to have an executor to direct that will.
Yep.
How should someone choose an executor?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the that's such an important part of why you need a will as well, right? Like otherwise, whoever wants to apply is going to be applying to the court to be appointed just to deal with your estate, and it may not be the person of your choice, right? But the first thing you want to see if they're in Ontario. Ideally, they'd be in Ontario and they'd be over 18 years old. Those are the first two requirements. Over 18 for sure. In Ontario is preferable because then you don't have to post a bond in the court to deal with it, until you deal with the administration of the estate. You want it to be somebody, yes, that you trust, but also who has the acumen to engage the right agents and people to support them in the process of dealing with the administration of the estate. It's not a 2-week process. It can be upwards of a year, depending on the assets that are involved, and of course where the courts are at. In probate, and during COVID, that took a lot longer, and we're still seeing, the effects of that. They're catching up now, which is great. Some of them have turned around much quicker. But during that time, there is real estate that has to be dealt with. Sometimes it's mortgaged, and you have to deal with the mortgage companies, or you have to figure out where those funds are going to be paid until you're able to sell that property or transfer it to the beneficiary or do whatever you need to do. So, the trustee's job is big. It's a lot of people think that naming a trustee is an act of love, and it's showing your loved ones how much you care about them. But sometimes, honestly, naming somebody else could be a bigger act of love, But people don't understand this, and they don't understand the role, and they don't understand who they're putting in this position. So just understanding the responsibility of it sometimes makes my clients rethink who they're naming.
But there's also a huge financial liability also too on the executor, because the government changed some rules and made it so that they can go back after the executor 2 years. Is it 2 years or 3 years?
Well, they need to get a clearance certificate. That's what I usually advise my clients. Once you're done, if you think that you've paid off all the taxes and stuff, and go get the clearance certificate from them so that they are telling you, okay, no, you're good to go. You've paid all the taxes that we know are owed by this estate, and now you can distribute. Without that, then the trustees do have liability. They can be at risk. So, and there is insurance that can protect them in those situations and stuff. But you don't want to come back and be sued by beneficiaries, or for the CRA to come to you personally, as you're saying, for the taxes that weren't paid or should have been paid. So,
well, that's only if the executor did not get a clearance certificate. Yes. They've paid. They thought they've paid all the taxes owing, but they weren't sure about some other properties and things that were not disclosed. They've paid all the beneficiaries, and the revenue Canada comes back and goes, "Oh, well, what about this or what about that? Or you didn't calculate this right, and you owe us another $50,000 in tax." Who's responsible for that?
The trustee.
Yeah.
And if the beneficiaries happen to be so kind-hearted and wonderful, and they're willing to give you back portions of what you've already distributed to them, then that's great. But otherwise, you've got to deal with it.
Yeah. So you got to pick and choose, and if you're going to accept it, understand your responsibility. Can executor be paid?
Yes, they can. But on that as well, I think part of that, like, it's not just picking the executor. So part of the estate planning is putting all of this stuff in order too, right? Like, we work with our clients to make sure that they clean up stuff. If my client comes to me and they have 15 bank accounts open and they're using 3 of them, I tell them, go shut down the rest of them. Why are you paying fees on them? And your trustee is going to be scrambling, trying to figure out where you have these cents sprinkled everywhere, and they're going to be responsible for closing it out, right? So do it now. Why are you leaving the mess to somebody else to clean up? It's not fair, right? Yeah. But they can be compensated. The standard, and the courts can vary this, but the standard is 2.5% on what goes into the estate and what's paid out of the estate. So that's the general compensation. You can edit that in your wills if you wanted to. Some people will give a gift or something to the trustee in lieu of it, and then they outline that in the will. But you need to make that clear. But yes, they can. But the trustee compensation will fall into their income tax return, if I'm correct. And they'll get it's income, so they'll be taxed.
CRA still gets theirs too,
right? So some
they
trustees, yes, if the trustees are also beneficiaries, a lot of the times they won't take that compensation. They'll just let it fall into the pot with the rest of the beneficiaries, depending on how everybody gets along, and then just split it that way.
Yeah. How often if someone has a will, how often should they review their will with an attorney? Yeah,
that's a great question. So there's a few triggering events that I would say you shouldn't let that be a little bell that dings in your head and says, okay, I should at least take another look. If somebody gets married, if somebody separates, if somebody gets divorced. Separation is a big one.
Yeah. That
can take a while, and people don't update their plans in the middle of it, and it can cause problems. Yeah. If you're entering into a long-term relationship or a common law relationship or cohabitation, you should look at it and see if it's still consistent, and what will the law say about these changes in circumstances. Obviously, if somebody passes away that you've named in your estate plans, like whether it's a trustee or a beneficiary or somebody else, take a look at it and make sure that what you have is still what you want to happen in that event. If new people are born and you want to make sure that they're included, or if you have specific things that you want to give to individuals that you acquire later on, revisit it.
A financial windfall.
Financial windfall is a big one. You would definitely need to, at the very least, take a look and make sure that you understand what your assets are, the tax implications that will come with them, as well as the benefits, and how you're going to deal with those, right?
Yeah. What's a cost to set up a will? Like from a very basic will to very extensive. Like what are we looking at? What's the range?
I mean, everybody charges differently.
Yeah.
We do a lot of flat fee billing for our stuff because we don't want it to be inaccessible to people. Like, we want you to get this done, And that's why I'm like, okay, you do it once, you do it right, you have all the planning in place, you have all the important conversations, and then you can shelf it for a good 10 years, right? If you do it right. Yeah. But for us, like for an individual with the powers of attorneys, it's about $1,000 all in, maybe a little over that. $950 plus HST and the administration fees. And for a couple, we reduce that a little bit. For corporations, we also offer a package. So if you're doing your personal and your corporate assets, depending on whether it's a couple or an individual that's in the businesses, where it gets a little more expensive is with the trusts, right? So, like I said, those are done hourly because it's hard to predict how much is going to go in there. But for the most part, it's reasonable. I think, anyways, for what you're getting in the plan.
And what you're going to be protecting
100%.
from. Like, this, you could take a look at, I can spend $2,500, even if it costs me $5,000 to set up a family trust, depending on your net worth. It's worth spending the $5,000 than paying the government 10, 20 times that.
Absolutely.
For not planning properly.
Absolutely. If you have the business and the assets that make that conversation worthwhile, then it's definitely worth the spend. That's a given,
I agree.
And if you're anything less than that, people think that they're going to save money by not doing this, or they can't afford it. Well, I can tell you,
can't afford not to.
You're going to spend so much more. Your estate is going to spend so much more. Your children are going to spend so much more. Your taxes are going to be so much more if you don't put this aside and just get it done, Yeah.
We are about out of time, but I want to have you back because there's so many more questions that I wanted to ask you. We just got into such a great conversation over some of the recent tax changes, but I do want to have you back because I get a lot of my listeners asking me about family trusts, different types of trusts, business owner structures, and how to properly set those up. So I definitely want to have you back and we can talk about that. How can people find you to either review their will or get a will or at a meeting and start planning their estate with you?
So you can call me, and our office number is 866-246-6529. You can email me. My personal email is my first name, so MARLENNE @AIONLAW.ca. And you can always find us on the website, ionlaw.ca, and reach out to any of the particular lawyers that you might need to reach out, but you can find me that way as well.
Are you guys on social media, LinkedIn?
Yeah, we are. We're on social media. I have a LinkedIn profile.
Right.
We have our Ion Law LinkedIn profile. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. Got a lot of videos. Yeah,
good.
Informational videos on there. Instagram, Ion Law Partners. So you can find us almost anywhere if you're looking.
Guys,
yes, please do
I
reach out.
Reach out. If you guys don't have a will, just if you fail to plan, then plan to fail. It's always been my motto. It takes a phone call. You'll spend more time planning your next vacation. The vacation's gone after 7 or 10 days. This is going to be lasting a lifetime. So guys, please reach out and get your wills and get your affairs in order. That's all for today. Guys, if you like this episode, please subscribe. Please share it with others that you think are going to like this. And please, my book is out now, Wealth Without Wall Street. It's on Amazon.ca. It's on Amazon.com. It's in chapters in Indigo, and it's in Barnes & Noble. Please pick up the book. You're going to learn a lot of stuff that you are not going to learn in the schools. That's all for today. Take care of your health and your wealth.